Welcome to Truth Stream. I'm Russell-J. Colin Gould. I'm the honorable guest of two honorable hosts, Joe Colin Rosati and Scott Stone. It's an honor to be here, guys.
It's an honor to have you. I got to say, we met Russell in Anaheim last weekend, and we were fortunate enough that he reached out and his team reached out to us to do this interview. And we're gonna let this unfold, and we're gonna start with a question that Scott had in the pre-interview. And please feel free to take it from there.
Well, I think we were thinking about starting with the origin story.
That's it.
With so many accomplishments, this interview could be part 6 and 7 3-hour long installments. But what set you on your journey, and what inspired you to take this on, and where did it all begin?
Well, for me, first, second, and third grade, I went to summer school, and I became really following the concept of sentence structure. And so I became quite the avid sentence diagrammer. So I learned about parts of speech and learned about adjectives and pronouns, adverbs and verbs, and what modified what. And, that was the start of my journey. And in 1995, I got into the quantum grammar and started really breaking down at that point the parsé, and spent a 5-year study breaking down dictionaries and different concepts around the world for communication skills. And I was really looking at mainly to this word, the spelling, word called spelling, and breaking down to find the negative in these words and remove them out of my life. And so it took me on a huge study. It was fascinating, and got deep into the words and the etymology of words and prefixes and suffixes, and learned about the quantum of the now space and the quantum entanglements with that. And I don't say entanglements, quantum entanglements, because en as a prefix to a word means no. That's why we have your port of entry, the port of no try, right? So all these words have created a scenario of negativity in our life. And so I remapped and vamped a system called the quantum banking system, and put it into play to use for the people of the world, and dropped out of the way. And in doing so, the birth certificate system. So fascinating journey for sure.
That's exciting. You mentioned the quantum banking system, and I know there's a great deal of discussion about the quantum financial system that is rumored to be set to replace our existing financial system. What do you have to say about that?
Well, the words are written in adjective pronoun form, so there's no facts. They use dangling participle verbs at the end of all their charters, which means that they don't have one legal sentence in their constructs. So I would not participate in it and give it one thought. I'd pitch it in the trash if it were me.
Interesting.
If it doesn't say anything, and it looks like it doesn't say anything, then how is it going to be forcible?
Just for the viewers, we're on this journey as well as you, and some of this is pretty mind-blowing to us as well, because Russell's been studying this for quite a long time. So we're here as part of the journey. So now, as far as I think the post office part of all this, tell us how you got to the level of where you are now in that system, if you will.
Yes. And so in 1995, I started working with a postmaster out of Lander, Wyoming. And I was involved in court cases where I was using the post office for service. And so I was learning about the mechanics of the post office, and I was getting into the grammar, and I made a friend with a guy, and he was a legitimate friend. I'd go hang out with him, and he would ask me about the words and what I was doing and how to set up facts. And, he was very fascinated with that, and the numerical ciphering to go with that. He was just enthralled with that. And then I swapped him out with that. And then he trained me, took me into the back of his post office and taught me about, different separation machines and franking stamps. And, I got involved in that. And as fate would have it, a state judge came off the bench. What that means is he didn't sit up where he normally sits. He came on my plane and took off his robe and he tried to enter a plea for me, but he made it to the clerk of courts, and the clerk was holding these stamps, and I'd already been to the post office, and I learned that without process on the paperwork, it's not supposed to go through the machine, right? So I'm looking at the judge going, there's where the power is. You're an actor. They're all where the mechanic is happening, which is the mechanics of moving paperwork or someone through the judicial system. And so I ended up learning a lot from that judge. He was a pretty brilliant judge, and he came off the bench quite a number of times for me. And it's very difficult cases. You win some, you lose some, you win some, you lose some. And I defeated myself a million times, and I found out what did not work. And it was a humbling road. And in doing so, I ended up making a lot of friends behind the scenes because of my courage of being correct and just wanting to find out truth and honesty. And I ended up at the post office in 2000, and there was a job application for a postal inspector, but in means no as a prefix to a word, so they were actually looking for a postal no-spector, right? So if you're doing an so I sued the post office on the mechanics of words for that position for specter, which means phantom, and I sent that to the post office in Washington, D.C., to myself as Postmaster Ivan General. And when the United States government, so it returned to me, but they put a label on top of the green card where I had over my writing, and it said Postmaster General as an adjective pronoun. Well, labels are classified as tickets, and tickets are classified as postage stamps. So when I autographed the stamp or the label coming back from the post office on my green card, gave me subject matter jurisdiction as Postmaster General of the United States. Now, at the time, I was speaking directly with William Henderson. He was the Postmaster General of the United States Postal Service. As soon as I had a conversation to him and explained the position of where he was and what he did not know to be the director of the fake leader presidents, he retired within 72 hours. So this is all on documented record with the U.S. Postal Service, and they are hiding these records from the general public because they don't want you to know the truth about what's going on, the ruse and the fraud that they've perpetrated against the people with their fraudulent leaders who have carried on a rouge against the people of the world. And it's very unfortunate, but they know that I'm standing in the correctness. I've been very honest and transparent with the world. And the quantum grammar system is really fascinating because you break out of the spell and you break down these words, and you all of a sudden you put them in a positive performance for yourself in the now space. And now the veil, the veil, DE veil, is no longer there because DE, what does DE to a word mean? It means to separate from. So you separate from your veil, the devel, right? And so once you separate from the veil, then you have mechanics of corporate piercing and how to articulate your utopia. And so,
and I know you were wearing a shirt that said 1775, right?
That is correct.
Do you care to expand a little bit on that?
Yes. And so I was going toe to toe with the United States Federal Court of Claims in Washington, D.C. And they placed on my contract a upside down seal pyramid. And I'm like, this is odd. So I went to the U.S. Treasury, and I said, because I'm trying to find, because it was processed, it had a file stamp on the paperwork, and I'm like, wait a minute, where's the seal from? Because I couldn't find any recorded documentation of the seal. Well, the seal was an inverted pyramid that had words that you had to look in the mirror and look backwards at. And so it took me to the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When I sat down with the U.S. Treasury agents at the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, they looked through all their books and there was no record of this seal. Well, how can you have process without any record through the Federal Registry of the corporate structure of a courthouse, foreign vessel and dry dock? So I the Treasury agents, when we looked at it, they said, well, you've got to look at what it says. And it said the Benjamin Franklin Post Office. So I went into the Benjamin Franklin Post Office, and it was close to the general public. I arrived there on December 20th, 2012. Because it was close to the general public, I gave them my credentials as Postmaster General, the slip that I explained to you guys, as well as my passport. And they called the janitor, and they called me back 4 hours later and said, can you meet us at such and 6 o'clock? We'd like to open up the museum for you and open up all the glass casings, and you can look through the books. So I was allowed to look through the books of Benjamin Franklin and articulate who he worked for, right? People may not like that, right? Because facts are facts. Facts don't have feelings. What he was doing prior to 1775 and the borrowing of 1.6 million francs and how that articulated to set up the Continental Government, otherwise known as nothing becomes law for 1 year, 1 day, and there's a thing called 3-day rescission. And so that'll take you to July 4th, 1776, right? So my question for you guys, Joe and Scott, is if you're in debt and you're not the creditor, how are you setting up terms?
That's a really good question.
Very good question.
So when you see 1776, be very cautious about what you're looking at and make sure you go get full closure and so you can have the full transparency to make a decision about what you're saying. So you don't wrong lead the public, because it's unfair to the general public because they did not have the necessary transparency. And this is the trick that's been perpetrated upon the people because they haven't done their homework, have not went and looked in the books. And it's a tedious track. So to answer your question to 1775, that's why I put the year 1775 on my shirt, because it's when they originally borrowed the money, right? So that's when they went from zero to debtor. So 1776, they're in a debt mode. Right? So they had to set the terms of the debt. Now it's your Bill of Rights. And then they used the document, unfortunately, as a banking instrument. And in 1999, the banking instrument expired. Now, my question for you is, did either of you, were you signatories on the original draft?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, good, because neither was I, so we're equal here. Absolutely. So what value, since it expired, what value does that note have now?
Well, what was that expiration predicated upon?
It was predicated upon a 1929 crashing of the stock market when the Rothschilds, who had bought the note, told the United States government that they'd be closing their banks on October 29th, 1929.
Wow. So what did that mean for the Rothschild balance sheet?
Well, right now it's fraudulent, 100%. I do not agree with those guys at all. And what they have done and what they've got away with. Good thing there's more of us than them.
Right.
So that's exciting for the people, and that's a good thing for the people, right? I totally give aid and love the people to do the correct thing, right? I'm just a guy with concept of grammar, right? There's a lot of dudes out here that are skilled in a lot of other theaters, and that if they did the correct thing, we could clean this up quite quick if they made a public spectacle on it and let all the bad guys see it. What's really cool about this planet is there's really nowhere to run, right? So that's a good thing. However, that also means that it's a two-edged sword. So if there's nowhere to run and you have a concept that you have to deal with in your now space, these are the mechanics of the sovereigns, right? We have to take accountability for our now space. Well, the grammar is a huge part of that, because if your grammar is written in past tense and future tense, and somebody shows up to talk to you, well, you're going to have now space jurisdiction to control your now space. If you write in the future tense and the past tense, you will be treated as such, because you will have no longer now space control of your matrix. So the sovereigns, there's different levels of sovereignty, as we know, right? Some sovereigns are sovereign in their heart, right? But unfortunately, that heart, because they've trapped us into the system of words, has to go down on paperwork, and paperwork has to have file stamps on it. So when I took out the whole macroeconomic scene at the Universal Postal Union, I took out the whole sea lanes for planet Earth so that they could not harm the citizens anymore, where the citizens could sit in neutrality in their 0 point of their now space, right? And so this is where the grammar comes into place. And these are the value of looking at the correct communication, parsing, significance, grammar, and looking at our words and positioning them so that our loved ones are safe, our things are safe, we are safe, right? And so these are things that we teach in the quantum system for sure.
Wow. So it would occur to me that there's been more than one bankruptcy that's taken place in our country. Right.
Sure.
Would you like to go into that a little bit?
I would.
It seems to be left out of American history.
For sure. So what I would say this is, when you articulate bankruptcy in its nativity, there's one thing that you have to look at, and that is called the law of the flag. Because whoever is the bearer or owner of the flag sets the terms of contract when the terms come into port or into a bank or into court, right? Or in your now space. So what I did, which was so different, is that I figured out when the United States Corporation was coming out of bankruptcy. And I took the flag away from them and claimed it under copyright. Now, the quantum banking system and the quantum grammar is copyrighted technology. The reason that is, the volition behind that is, if you were to make it open source, the bad guys who already know this technology would use it against the people and never comply. And so that's why I've maintained the copyright integrity of the correct communication of the quantum grammar, right? And the Title IV flag, right? There's not a whole bunch of owners of the flags. There's usury of it, and I get out of the way and let people control their own world because I have terms that I comply with within my corporate structure, right? And I've had to honor those. And it's been a tough road to hoe. I'm telling you flat out. Right? It's not been easy because, like I said, nobody cared in 1999. Nobody cared in 2001. Nobody cared in 2004, right? Nobody cared. They were busy being spun up on false narratives. The media did a masterful job at the psychological psyops on the people of the world. And all of a sudden, we outsourced all of our kindness for meanness by racing off to false pretenses of war. And in doing so, we unleashed a huge yoke and burden because the outside world looked at the American people as the problem. The American people are good people. We love our families. We love our lives. We love other people around us. Unfortunately, we've been tricked in the straw man situation where we didn't know our head from tails. So as we look at that and we look at the value of how to choose a leader, leaders are chosen by those who don't make mistakes. They're chosen by the people, right? I've put myself into a leadership position because there were no people there, because they were all on the birth certificate system. So I stepped outside that paradigm with my claim of the life, and I claimed my life. And then I learned about the different facets of sovereignty, which took me down many trails. Like I said, you can be sovereign in your heart, but at some point you got to put it on paperwork. Right? Paperwork has to have the fee for freight. There's mechanical things that happen there. And this is where the contract world has jurisdiction over the sword. Even though any fool can go off and kill. Yes, that is true. But a real warrior uses wisdom, gets full closure, and makes sure that the needs are balanced on both ends before they make a decision to hurt someone. Right. So these are things that we have to be very cautious on. And this is all done through contract, right? This is where needs are placed out on contract. The value of the quantum grammar language is we can go in and out of all languages in the world, or I can, and so can others. And we can lose no deviation in our sentence structure. So if I want to write a contract in English and Chinese and take it over to Russian, there's no translation deviation. So which means that if you come into the terms of the needs that everybody concurs to, that everybody has to comply with it. right? Because then you can put the thinking on trial, right? And so it brings accountability and it cleans up the performances to make people accountable for their actions. So this is a very valuable tool. And because I set this up on a global level, this is what makes me the global authority on speaking on these matters. And, you know, when you come to my workshops, you learn a lot about the diplomacy of how that neutrality works for the citizens. Because we want to keep the citizens. I'm a little bit different. I don't like to rush off to war. I don't like to wash off to fight. Other people do, and other people say there's no contracts for that, and that's on them. But I want to look at full transparency, full closure, and I know that there's nothing out there to help but we the people, right? We the people are, in fact, the government because there's nothing there, right? Those are facts, right? They have your border. You guys know where your border is? Your border's in your now space because they did away with them. Okay, so you have to be able to hold that space in contract, right? Because there is no border. You don't believe me? Head south, head north. You'll find out real fast, right? Nothing there.
Are you saying I have to take responsibility for my border?
You have to take accountability, and then you give closure, right? That's where transparency comes into place. That's where following correct protocols, mechanics. This is what this is all about, is to give people a threshold and a position to take a position, right? Because if you've never been grounded and you've never checked from within, well, it's unfair to the world for you to just go running out. It always comes from within and then goes out. So just keep that in mind for sure when you look at the quantum system.
Interesting.
Yeah, it just sounds like there's so many things that people haven't learned that it can be so overwhelming. I mean, if we look at different facets of, you know, how the media lies to us, how history's been completely manipulated as well, you know, to people just becoming privy to some of this, where can someone start to look into some of this stuff that is, you know, they might hear you and go, oh my gosh, where do I start? Because you've studied this for so long that it can be a little bit overwhelming. So any advice, and then we can get into some of the other components that Scott and you were talking about before the interview.
Yes, that's a great question. You know, I've been involved. It'll be 28 years here in March, which is quite a while to be studying one specific topic.
Yes.
In the military, right? It's a lot. You know, I have had the blessing of walking through specific doors that most people probably have never been through or even thought of walking through, right? And then giving closure, like you were saying, on the border of what I was setting up for the people of the world, right? Saying, hey, we don't have to do, it's all nonsense. Saying organizations, fraudulent organizations and fictitious organizations like the U.S. Department of Defense, fictitious organizations like the World Health Organization, fictitious organizations like the United Nations, right? These are fables. This is fictionary. When I show up at those places, they have already told me each location that we are a fraudulent organization and do not use correct grammar.
Wow.
So they already know what's up. And I have a different terms with them based upon the flag and based upon the things that I've done. So where does the guy go to look? It's a great question. So I have a YouTube channel, lastflagstanding.com. And we have a place called fortheclaimofthelife.com, which are websites that give people a different perspective, videos to watch on me, right? I've started doing videos in the last couple of years, right? There's a few old ones of me, but you gotta keep in mind, when this was happening, I was surviving, right? Because it was a very tedious thing to walk into the Pentagon and tell them they were full of shit, right?
I can imagine. I mean, wow.
Well, you meet SWAT teams, right?
Yeah.
So it's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing. So you want to make sure. So I wasn't dragging film crews around, right?
Right.
See where I'm coming from? Because I was putting my life on the line.
Yes.
Right. And that's where I have a lot of pause for a lot of people that do a lot of talking out here. Oh, okay. Well, you better find yourself in now space before you go tearing into places. Because if you don't find yourself, you're going to get lost. And that's why I really feel bad about these January 6 people. right? They get spun up. They get told to come to DC, right? Someone tells them to come there, and they show up there, and then they end up in my court systems, right? Not knowing anything, right? Checking themselves in, hiring attorneys. I mean, how can you tell who's not a sovereign, right? It's who's got all the attorneys. It's just a fact, right? Sovereigns don't hire out. Now, an attorney can now, instead of being an attorney, can be your counsel and give you counsel advice. But they've already run a 3-judge court of appeals against you when your attorney signs the stamps, the prosecutor signs the stamps, and the clerk signs the stamps. You've just been in federal appeals court. You're just in a traffic court, right? Or you're just in a county court. You don't comprehend the mechanics of what's happening here. And so it's designed to suck us dry financially and give us false hopeism, the judicial system, right? Because there's nothing there. They already know it, right? I've already been there everywhere. They already know what's up for sure, right? But that's just me because I got a different gig and a different style when I show up in those places for sure. So but most people, are stuck in the fable, right? They think that there's a court system going on and they keep the facade going really good because it makes the attorney, everybody's getting paid. The sad thing is people are not getting solutions. So that's where the part needs to be cleaned up is how do the people get solutions? Unfortunately, the world has moved into a state of martial law where it is a wartime theater in every vector. So we have to position ourselves, not so much to go out and say, he said, we said, they said, but to set up our border around our location, right? To start networking with our fellow mankind, to start making sure that, if there's no one coming, that we're cognizant on how to make sure we have water, take care of our needs, right? And learn how to trade with people, right? And this is where the quantum grammar contracts come in place, because you can set up trade lines outside the parameter because you're in the now space, right? The fiction it only has past tense and future tense jurisdiction. They don't have any now time authority. So it's really cool once you set this up, and these techniques work quite nice. So hopefully that helps. Where do you find it? Well, you find it on the videos. You go to fortheclaimofthelife.com and lastflagstanding.com on YouTube, and you can see my documentary. And there's a video clip there of all the different paradigms, that I was doing back in those spaces. Right now, I haven't been doing a lot of videos. I've just been doing a lot of watching. I learn a lot more when I watch. I find out what people do know and what they don't know. And so It allows me to make sure that the citizens and the claimants that have, and the sovereigns that are joining me have the necessary tools to safeguard their lives and their loved ones. And so that's where I'm at, is the networking. And we're meeting wonderful people in the quantum grammar community now. There's a lot of people that really care about the world, they care about themselves, they care about their families and their values. They have values. You find that if people have a moral compass on them, we have all these blurred lines. So how do we get around those blurred lines? Well, you do the correct thing when no one's looking, right? Real simple. You be honest with yourself and you be honest with everyone else when nobody's looking. And as you do that, it stays with you, right? So these are things that we look at, and we look at the value of what does that mean to be a champion of your now space? There's champions all over the place. I hear wonderful stories of people families being driven apart, and all of a sudden they start communicating again, and they feel like it's not a very good thing, or not too important to the world. I'm like, that's important. That's important to your space. Every little victory is a victory for you. We're all champions, right? And we're not taught that. We're not taught how to be a champion, or how the authenticity of doing the correct thing and communicating with, and it's okay to walk into peril, into strife, and to have tough conversations. That's okay, but let the other person speak too. It's a two-way street if you want solutions, for sure. Don't be so one-minded. So,
I just want to say real quick that is I watch a lot of Bishop Larry Gators, and he says that sets the foundation, but his shows are about 4 hours and we're about halfway through ours. So that sets the foundation. Thank you for doing some clarity. And now I know that Scott has a lot of really good questions. So I want to turn
interesting questions.
Please.
Before we get away from this one, you mentioned January 6th. And my mother's 83. I had a conversation with her, and she's scratching her head. She's thinking, I don't understand this, Scott. when I was a kid, it was always, if you got a grievance, take it to the steps of the Capitol. You march on Washington. It's just what you do. It's always been done that way. No one ever called it Pearl Harbor. That was just part of our discourse in this country. And now all of a sudden, everybody's a terrorist. And that seemed to me to be, some cultural manipulation. I don't know from a legal standpoint if they have any ground to stand on, but now we're presented with the reality that we have political prisoners being held, presumably without charge. And there's very little public outcry about it. Not to diminish the outcry that's there, but we don't have people camped out in front of these prisons or anything. And how did we get here?
There certainly would be outcry if people knew if it was happened to them. And
right.
My heart sympathizes for them because I have been in the hole for 6 months, 7 months. I've been without food for 70 days. I've been beat up, tased, maced, you name it. It's happened, right? Bones break. It's an actual thing, right? I've been froze out. I've wore no clothes for 7 months. One time wore no clothes for 6. It's an actual thing. The air conditioning's real and the water's real, right? It's a factual thing. I did not get mad about it. I set up a solution to get out of it. Unfortunately, those people have walked into a huge trap. They actually thought there was a Washington, D.C. That's just not the case. That ended in 1999. Then they set up a zone for themselves, and they're playing with themselves, and we're not invited, and you're not invited, and I'm certainly not invited. And in that play theater, they decided to go to war against everyone for no uncertain terms. They didn't set the terms of why they needed to go to war. They came up with an adjective pronoun saying that they were going to create a condition of state and create harm and havoc upon the people. Now, please comprehend this. And I want your audience to comprehend. The people doing that to them are the middleman. Again, we are talking to middlemen when you go to the steps of DC. Right? Those are the middlemen. Those are fake actors doing fake things, acting with fake credentials. They're not the ones pulling the strings. The financiers behind them are the little nefarious ones, but they're just someone pulling the money. They're being influenced by their shareholders behind them who are now directing the agenda that they see fit. And it's a sad agenda. And it's a one that doesn't have to be. We can maneuver that out of our lives, but we have to be networked. We have to be wise. And you just don't run into theaters without having full transparency of closure. All right. So when you see these people getting their court cases dismissed, why is that all happening? Why? Because the courts are screaming they don't have subject matter jurisdiction. Because there's nothing there and they're not using facts. And when they do use facts, the fiction judges can't hear a fact because no law or fact shall be tried in court, only the condition of mind. And so you have to be able to authenticate that and place value upon that. And unfortunately, those who have been told and tricked into going to a fake location in Washington, D.C. for January 6th, they're the ones that have a lot to lose here because their lives are being majorly influenced. There's not a lot because they're involved in, imagine if you were taught a lie and you stood behind it to the death. That's unfair.
Yeah.
And I comprehend that. That's true what I would call in nonsense, right? They don't have any sense because they don't know where they're at in time and space. They thought there was an actual president, for crying out loud. That's just a fallacy. It ended in 1999. And when we come out of our delusion, when the people finally come out and realize, hey, wait a minute, that's the year they did away with all the presidential guidelines. They slid it into the court system. How can a court make a ruling about the will of the people? Right? So once they comprehend the mechanics of what actually happened there, and the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm Chief Judge of the U.S. Supreme Court, not on a writ of certiorari because that's only an opinion. Right? And so it's a pronoun adverb verb. I figured out a condition is how to come in as a condition of state and order the courtroom open at the Supreme Court. And they took a gold coin as filing for me because I'm treasurer of the country. So for me, my perspective was different. But those people in January 6th, they don't know any of this stuff. Right? And they are in some serious serious trouble. You know, the families that are there spending so much of their lives being just ruined. You know, I'm paying for trying to get phone calls from them, and I mean, it's a mess. It's a real mess. And you know, there are good people, maybe in the U.S. military that could do something about it, maybe. But then they'd have to have someone stand behind them in legality to fight off the bad guys, right? I'm that guy. I'm the guy that they should have been calling, right? But for their own knowledge, they have not made that call. I'm not going to be judgmental on it. I can just sit back and watch. So when you ask why I haven't been doing a lot of videos, I've been watching, been learning from you guys, from the world.
Well, that sounded like an offer. Are you? Is
Well,
it something you're open to? Because
there are tentacles of usury to be in the foreign vessel and dry dock called the courthouse, right? And so it's not stuff I give out over the air, but there are things that you can definitely clean up to start undoing that usury. And that usually when you start doing that, a lot of physicality comes with it, right? Because they know what you're doing, right? Because they already seen the program. Right? They comprehend, oh, he's disconnecting. And it's like the movie The Matrix. Oh, once you disconnect, they're going to kick you out. So you have to have that space and neutrality to go into. And this is where the quantum community of the quantum grammar system, this is where we're busy setting up that network for the people to come into, to create that safe haven and neutrality, to ward those people off, and to give people a space where they don't have to be bombarded with all this false influencing and the bombardment of the world. And it's a tedious task. You know, as you know, confidentiality is our biggest strength, but the also, you know, sharing transparency to the world is also the main reason that people come. So,
well, I got to ask, because, you know, as someone that has looked into the 17th letter of the alphabet, we know what that is, and hearing that, you know, there's a covert military operation that's been going on known as the White Hats for several decades. What and where do you see, whether one believes in that or not, where do you see what's the best way to move forward from now to you know, make the world better, to make this country better? What do you suggest? What do we do? What do we do as people? What do you do? What do you, I'm just asking. I don't know what you would say to the people.
Well, you look from within inside of who they are, of who I am, right? I look from the inside of who I am, and I test the waters to make sure that if I'm going to communicate to network in the fields that you're talking about, that I have the same authenticity back. Am I talking to a principal, or am I talking to a middleman, right? How does that work, right? And what are the protocols of their usury that I should be cognizant of before I make a decision? Because I would give them, number one, it's only fair if they want to do something with me, I would give them the necessary transparency of where I'm at, where I'm seeing things from, and what I'm witnessing, because I can only be a witness to what they're doing, right? I'm just a witness witnessing here, right? Of what they're doing, what I'm doing, and holding space that the laws of attraction and the quantum entanglements and the 0 point that you so much want to talk about, that plasma energy, that source, is on the same page, that I know it when I see it, right? But that comes from within me. I haven't seen it in quite a while. I'm just being fair to the world. I've not seen leaders who they would say are leaders, or speakers that they say are speakers. I'm watching. I mean, there's a few, but I don't pass judgment on them, because I've never had conversations with them, right? And I would ask the same of people of me, unless they've had a conversation with me, please don't pass judgment on me, right? Because I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. It doesn't matter what I do, right? So I ask the general public to just, before you pass judgment on what I've done or where I've been or who I am, you know, talk to me, right? And because if you guys went at the thing in Anaheim, where did I sit? I sat with the people, because I'm with the people, right? That's who I am, with people. So, you know, that's what I would. So it comes from within. To answer your question, it comes from within, and then really test that spirit before you start saying, oh, that person really wants to. But it's more than helping. What can they do to help the situation? What goods do they bring to the table, right? If they have goods to the table, or do they just have needs, right? So these are tools that we have to really, or I look at, I'm very cautious about. And, I don't, unlike other people that voice their battle plans on air, to me, it's all classified, right? I'm not about to voice what direction to go and who to go talk to, this and that, unless we have the necessary tools to go do that, right? Because you have to have tools, you have to on the ground, in the air, confidentiality, and you got to, in the martial law theater, you got to be flexible, you got to adapt, you got to overcome, you got to move. And so sitting still is good sometimes, but moving is awful good, and move quick if you're going to move.
But on behalf of the ANCAPs out there, I got to ask. So when we're looking at the statement, there is no government. It just doesn't exist. It's theater. That's in many ways that's a dream come true for a lot of anarcho capitalists and whatnot. The problem is there's still people enforcing these theatrical laws. There's still people that want to tell you how to live and what you can and can't do. But if there is no structure,
this is where cleaning up the usuries of your life, so that now you can position yourself in the now space of neutrality. That's where that comes into place. So a lot of people are making presumptions that they're being correct, and yet they still have tentacles that the fiction world is holding on to. And that's what's happened to these poor guys in January 6th, is they have all these tentacles that they never cleaned up, and they entered into a straw man system and did not have the tools necessary to navigate the space. So once you get the tools necessary to navigate the space and clean up your usuries, to now position the performance that you so choose to convey for your world, then you become autonomous, and a networking autonomy for sovereignty for those around you and for those that to direct. And what we have found is that if you do your usuries correct, to where you have it all covered and the grammar's correct and the shipping's correct, there's no one coming. You just got to perform for you, and you have to have your autonomy. You want to be networked, because one man can't do it alone. Judge Donald Hall told me in 1997, he said, Russ, he says, you're a sovereign, all right. And it looks like you're going into shipping. He says, but be careful. He says, we'll put you out on a boat and ship you out there naked, and you're going to have to figure out how to survive. It's not a lot about that. It's not a lot about that. What is he talking about? I didn't know about it till I got myself into predicaments at a later date that cost me, some serious poundage, right? So I had to figure all that out, right? And so those are lessons, So when you want to go down this path, you want to make sure that you have transparency, full closure before you make decisions to jump and move quick. Because when you do move, you need to move.
But in doing so, you have the opposition or the other side of the argument has to grant you full disclosure, and that I think that's
they can't, right? They cannot give you full disclosure because they don't have the ability to think anymore, because the birth certificate system is over. So the capacity for them to state a claim, which is thinking, is just no longer. Right. And so when you live it and you comprehend from my position of where I've been and what I've done, that statement would make a lot of sense. Right. But to someone from the outside world, I comprehend where you're coming from. Right. I totally get it. But from someone from my tanglement, right, my quantum now space, and the things that I've done, that statement is it's very easy to say. And as you can see, there's no one walking down my doors.
Well, I mean, you've clearly paid the iron price for, on your learning curve with all of this. But obviously this is finally working for you, I think, in a meaningful way. How does the individual make this work for them in a meaningful way? There's a lot of pitfalls.
Kevin White, perhaps.
You start with we start with the claim of the life, right? Once you get involved with that, we put you into a network of postmaster study groups We have the syntexlearningcenter.com. We have different factions to put the function of how to use the tentacles that you now start to move. So it's not just me standing there, right? There are a lot of people behind the movement here that their names are such good people, right? And they come to the workshops and they learn so much and they ask great questions. I will tell you this, if you've been to one of my workshops, you learn an awful lot, right? And I learn an awful lot. I'm learning from you guys. I'm learning from the people, right? You guys ask great questions. You have great concerns. So it's my job to make sure that what I've built is in position to satisfy your needs, right? Some things always obviously won't match up every time. And maybe I don't have the correspondence and the correct answer for a specific question, but I will stop myself. I will go find that answer and I'll come back to that individual and say, hey, I found what you were looking for. This is what I found from my perspective. I can only give them for the position that I witnessed myself learning from. It's up to them to make a determination because I'm not going to control anyone, nor do I want to.
Excellent. Well, before we move on to some other topics, do you have anything you'd like to ask?
Well, I am curious. Who do you think who's running this country right now?
That's a good question.
I mean,
we didn't miss out.
Is Biden? I mean, you know,
It's the fox is guarding the hen house.
Well, that's been going on for a while.
A long time. You can't, because it's so vast on a macro scale of what we see people trying to infiltrate our lives with, especially from the scientific side, right? Let's just look at the scientific side. In the scientific side, when you meet with the bankers that fund Elon Musk, right? They approach me, right? So we have those conversations. What they think of mankind is quite appalling from their perspective, right? Like they're like, we got to chip everyone, right? That this is their thinking, right? Elon's going to be perfect for it. Russ, we need you to do this, this, and this. No, thank you. Under no circumstances am I going to compromise the security of the citizens of my continent. You keep in mind, do you have any clue who you're talking to? The Pentagon's listening, everybody's listening to you, blah, 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 right? So their perspective on this agenda, this death agenda that they have, and it is what it is, right? It is what it is. We have to accept that as a mankind. Right? We have to accept this. People want to kill us. Okay, well, that's cool. I don't want to hurt anybody if I don't have to, but those are the terms coming at me. Then I need to find the necessary tools, the necessary friends to make sure that type of thinking doesn't hurt anyone else. Right? And so I think there's a lot of good people out there that are qualified for that. But to come into contact with me, you have to come through a certain mechanic so I can put you in position so I don't get in trouble and I don't want to put anybody else in trouble. But the bad guys, there's not very many of them. The problem is their finances pay a lot of people to make sure that if you do go after them, that they're going to try to come after you. So you have to live by the blood feud, right? You have to comprehend where I'm coming from on that. When you watch my video on my channel, a blood feud, right? I get it, right? I comprehend what's going on. I'm not happy about it because if you knew me, I'm just pretty chill, mellow guy, pretty quiet. I just study a lot, and people might say I'm a nerd, right? I study, right? I look at metals. I look at all kinds of things. I have different facets and functions going on in my life. But who's running the country? It'd be the financiers behind the scenes, right? And the shareholders. It's not what you see up there. They're middlemen. They don't know anything. They pick up a phone and say, yes, do this, do that. They couldn't do nothing. They're as harmless as can be. They think they're tough, but I guarantee you, if I got them one-on-one, they ain't that tough. Right? That's a fact.
Well, what do you think? You ready to get into?
Yes, I think we're ready to move on to.
Well, there was something that came up in a brilliant interview with Winifred Adams and Satya Stone.
Yes,
and I in my more esoteric pursuits, I stumbled across monatomic gold and some of the legends behind it and whatnot. And you had mentioned the founding the periodic table of monatomic elements, and I really want to know more about that. What led you to it? What it means to you? What it means to us?
Well, at the time I was, and I still am, good friends with a lot of the scientists that were behind David Hudson. David Hudson was just a spokesperson. He wasn't actually doing the work on the monos, right? So you have to comprehend that. So my perspective is a little bit different because these gentlemen friended me, right? That we became really good friends. And in doing so, they shared technology with me on the monoatomic stuff. And we put together a concept of 33 atom clusters, and we put it on paperwork, right? And we charted it out in quantum grammar and the manipulation of matter, and there's a lot of different things to that. So I put it in a periodic table, which was inside my periodic table, which is built on a tetrahedron. The reason why it's in a tetrahedron is because of the laws of boxing. Are you guys familiar with the laws of boxing?
I don't believe I am.
No.
Okay. So in the federal styles manual, in your government federal styles manual, U.S. government printing office, there's a claim in there that says, and it's in all countries in their styles manuals, that anything in a box is not on the page. So that's why they put boxes around our money. That's why they put juries in jury boxes. That's why they put judges in judges boxes, because there's nothing there. Well, the whole same thing held true with the molecular structure of matter. Because of the laws of four cornering, there was nothing there. When I published this, I was at the time conducting, and I still am conducting, the largest court martialing in the history of planet Earth. Corporation case R period, tilde 385, tilde 460, tilde 312, colon U period S. Period. And at the time, I had deep undercover operatives from the CIA, Clowns in Action, and the fumbling-bumbling idiots, Jeff treated with. And the fumbling-bumbling idiots, and they were trying to set up a deal with me. I am connected to the largest quartz posit on planet Earth. And the quartz posit runs about 99.997% pure. And we have 55 million tons on surface. And I mean, it's massive, right? It's huge. Anyhow, that's just on the surface, let alone the pyramids underneath. It's huge. And the Department of Energy, so they were trying to set me up. I was setting up trade platforms for, as you can imagine, I've been approached by every agency in the world and every family in the world on setting up trading platforms for assets, right? I am very good at this, right? This is one of my wheelhouses that I've been blessed to learn, and a lot of accountability with that. And these gentlemen were instrumental in positioning my knowledge into a position on the monoatomic level that we had done enough. It took us 3 years to walk through just that phase of things, right? Just on the mono side of tearing things apart, putting things back together. Now, as you know, we went through many learning curves. We had to tangle with Lawrence Livermore, the Argonne Corporation out of Chicago, and the Heraeus and all them out of Europe. I mean, it was a massive undertaking to run into all these criminals who, number one, could not qualify the monoatomic because there is no tool to test for monoatomic matter. Right? This is a fable, right? So when someone says they have it, I'm not going to be judgmental. I'd have to see the mechanic of how they approached it. I know what I would do, probably different than them, but I'm not going to be judgmental. And quite frankly, they're not going to show me their mechanic, right? And I'm not asking. That's the best part. I'm not asking. So I'm confident with what I'm doing. So when I published that, what they call the National Security Agency, the Department of Defense, and the Clowns in Action pulled me off the street, had a conversation about changing the molecular structure of matter on planet Earth because they'd never seen it taken out of a box, which disqualified all PhDs on chemists on planet Earth because their education was totally in the box. And thus, they couldn't see the monos, right? Because their education led them into a position where they couldn't see the answer. Right? They didn't know how to ask the question either. So it was a catch-22. you didn't even know there's an answer because you didn't even know there's a question based
It's
upon.
just Schrodinger's PhD.
Oh, Schrodinger's little kittens. Oh boy, he got lost on that one, no doubt about it. There's something about witnessing that throws it all off.
The observer.
The witness, you can count him, right? Sure. And then the scalar, yeah, you get it for sure. So they wanted to talk about what had been done because they were pretty. Number one, they were pretty impressed, right? They're like, holy, and pretty interesting conversation. They wanted to, at the time, they were really into the court martialing, right? So they had a lot of conversations about the Pentagon and some of the things I was doing. They were cool with that. I don't want to get into those. A lot of that's classified, but they were definitely saw a different perspective of what matter could be. Now let's fast forward a little bit. This was back in 2005, right? So let's fast forward on what we're seeing now. Right, with the graphene oxide and the scalar wave technology and what they've really honed into, which is what I would classify as the invisible. Invisible is not because we know it's visible. The visible army, right? That they have their own little portage, right? Their own little porthole through space, and it's unfortunate. Because they look at it as bingo free space, right? That from the people that created it and the shareholders behind it, they're looking at bingo free space as the concept of control, right? So it's about controlling the free space, right? Well, it's not free if you can molecularly manipulate everything from cellular destruction of mitochondria to whatever, right? They got it down. And these are the people, unfortunately, that are behind the people, the invisible people that you say, are running the country. Right? Who are they? It's not so much one person, right? It's a network of concepts, and those concepts, from their perspective, that they're cleaning their crops, right? So they have a different perspective. Just cut the crop back a little bit, that, and that's really how they look at it, right? So you have to comprehend that.
That's huge.
So, go ahead.
I'm just saying that's huge, just that component alone. But please don't let me interrupt your flow here.
Yeah, no, and so the monoatomic. So I took it out of I put it into a tetrahedron structure, right? Which I took out some of the things that could be manipulated by molecular bombardment of electron flow, which changes the perspective on what a periodic table looks like, right? And atomic weight, that's one thing, but you got to look at the scalar side of things too, and the witness position, right? And so I took that effect to it as well. So not only did I cover atomic matter, but I looked at the everything from the joules to the what caused it to go on the amperage on the electrolysis side, what they call the electromotor series is, I guess, be a way to look at it in some aspects, but mainly in the electrolysis of thought, right? Because everything is 0 point. Anyway, sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. We've heard a lot of things about the properties of monatomic gold, for instance. I haven't explored the other elements. I'm fascinated by this, but there seems to be something very interesting that happens at the monatomic level with time and space and mass and what might you have to add to that? Because it sounds like you're the guy to ask that question to.
Well, yeah, 4-9 density mass. Yeah, for sure. Right. And that is an actual phenomenon. And then there's things that you can do at that point, either through electrolysis or frequency to reverse that. Right. So I'm not going to get into those details, but there's definite a lot of sharp people out here that are definitely diving into those fields. I've stepped away for right now temporarily because for me, building something you need security, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't want to put your concepts out there and have the wrong guy walk through the door. And, I've been guilty of being, putting my concepts out there and people walking through the door. And the next thing you know, my concepts are being moved a different direction, and the direction did not help people. And so these are some of the things that we teach about storing our own energy and really be a little bit, control your thoughts, right? Before you think, and control, and really take pause and a little meditation time for ourselves to ground and find yourself before you get involved in some of these theaters. And hopefully people will do that. I'm doing it for myself, and hopefully it shows.
From a maybe a historical perspective, do you have anything to say about monatomic gold and its properties, or where we might be affected by that?
See, these batteries that they're making out of the lithium is just nonsensical technology, right? Mm-hmm. So they're telling us that this green technology that they got, this is worthless technology in the actual field of scalar technology, right? So we're being bombarded again for another 200 years of stupidness if we follow this type of thinking.
Right.
But thank goodness there's good people out here, and the chaos is out there. So, who knows what that looks like when it's all said and done. But I believe that there's good people everywhere, and it's just a matter of putting our minds together. And the human mind is the best computer in the world. Right? It is.
Quantum computer.
It is the ultimate quantum computer, and hopefully the people keep their mind intact for them, right? And so that's the fight that we're up against now, as you guys know.
Yeah, and I know we have you about for an hour, and so I don't know if there's anything else that either one of you want to cover in closing, and I know we want to have you back relatively soon, because there's so much to learn to this, but I just
I'd love to geek out a little bit more.
Yeah, there's so much to
one
this.
Question that just popped up.
Okay, go ahead.
With regard to us being a quantum computer, and there's a number of different approaches to quantum computing. IBM has its way of doing things, but D-Wave, which seems to be the most influential force in quantum computing, or the most prolific, as I understand it, as a total layman, is that the technology mimics human physiology to some degree, and they're attempting to achieve that component. What do you have to say?
And this is where the 5G becomes a problem with that, because now they're influencing the subspace there, and so that is the problem. But yes, you are correct. Done in complete harmony off the magnetic flux of the Earth, that's a different function. But then they would have to unyoke the Earth and take off all the geoengineering, and they're not doing it. So yes, I totally concur with you, and I'm concur with those. But the problem is the how, who's programming it, and
right,
and to what ends. Now, if it was more of a natural position where they unyoke the geoengineering and allowed the good people of the world to come up with the concepts for themselves and to create that space for themselves, well, this is freedom, right? This is happiness. This can be done.
Right, but CERN runs on D-Wave.
Well, you can
maybe a different application there.
You could get it. You could get more out of a jar of grapefruit, right? Out of CERN, colliding things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But hey, they want to spend that type of bucks. That's on them.
Right. Good to know. We got a list of questions for the next interview, which hopefully you'll be gracious enough to come back and grant us. Sure. Is already starting to form. I love this stuff. I absolutely love it.
Is there anything you want to say in closing, Russell J. Gold?
Hey, at the end of the day, the grammar controls your now space on contract. So learn how about that, and you can learn at that on our website at lastflagstanding.com or fortheclaimofthelife.com. And at the end of the day, truth wins. It's just how it is. People will gravitate towards correctness. Hopefully they can see the authenticity of who I am. I have not walked a day in their shoes, nor have they walked a day in my shoes. So please do not be judgmental at what you see, nor will I be judgmental at what I see. It's a two-way mirror there for sure.
Well, we appreciate you and your mind and everything that you've done for humanity, and can't wait to see how this all plays out. Because, we there's so many things, there's so many different people that are throwing their hat in the ring, and it's going to be a very interesting unfolding over the next few weeks, months, and years. So we can't wait to see where this goes.
Truth's going to win. And at the end of the day, the God man, the source within you, it is the one that you tapped into and I'm tapped into. It wins. Right.
Yes.
And so we have to know that. And we have to open that. And so and we have to be cautious on how to open it, and then cautious on how we bring it back, because you can give love away and love comes back. Right. So these are the things also with energy, right? Give it away and it comes back. Give it away, it comes back. The problem is that too many people hoarding it now. And so they don't know how to give. So I totally comprehend where they're coming from, just because the way the energy's flowing right now. It can change.
Well, on that note, we'll close and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks so much, Russell. Really appreciate it. Look forward to the next one.
Hey, looking forward to you and your audience, and awesome show.
Thank you.
Thank you.